So are we recording now? We are.
Yes.
Okay, so I think the first order of business is public comments. Are there any? Hearing none. Second order of business, I believe, is to approve the minutes from the May meeting. So do I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
And a second?
Why don't we table that resolution till we have quorum?
Yeah, you're right. Okay.
Okay.
Well, at any rate, so after the approve the meeting minutes, the next thing is the you, Eric, right?
That's me.
Okay, take it away.
All right. So here we are in our annual budget cycle. So just a reminder of where we are. So last meeting, we went through our proposed targets. We talked about revenues. We went through the staffing plan and we talked about compensation. Today, we're going to go through expenses. We're going to look at the consolidated budget and cash flows, and the balance sheet activity. All of that was in the mailing. We'll talk to it today. I'd like to get to the committee recommendation. Typically, the past couple of years, we've split this budget process into 3 meetings. I recognize that your guys' time is valuable, so I'd love to do it in 2. So if we can get through all of this today, then we can go ahead and cancel next week's meeting. So with that, just a reminder, and Commissioner, I realize that you're new to the committee, so I'll just catch you up as we go, so feel free to interject. So last month, we discussed the organization proposed goals for the year. We're looking to bring 515 projects for $58 million and an installed capacity of 8.2 megawatts in the financing programs, an additional 1,200 projects for over $98 million, nearly $99 million, or 52 megawatts of installed nameplate capacity on the incentive programs for an organizational total of 1,726 projects for a capital deployment of $157 million, of which 31 million we're expecting to be Green Bank balance sheet pledged funds, and for a nameplate installed capacity of 60.5 megawatts. And John, per your previous requests, we've included the estimated societal impacts of these. So we're expecting an annual GHG avoidance from these of 247,000 tons of greenhouse gases, creation of 274 job years, of direct job years, 355 indirect and induced job years. So we're able to start to speak to that. I will tell you that those estimates are low, and that's simply because we are updating some of our factors to include battery storage. So I know that our multiplier in there is not the most up to date. So we're on the low side of that. Moving from this, kind of what talking about revenue. So last meeting, we walked through our revenues, similar to previous years.
Hey, Eric, I think that there was a question on.
Oh, sorry.
Commissioner.
Yeah, sorry, Eric, I didn't want to interrupt you verbally. I just figured I'd raise my hand digitally. Just job years. I just want to confirm, only because at DECD it's critical to us in our organization. So I just want to make sure when you say job years, you're just estimating 1 year, but do you actually have an average duration? How sustainable are these jobs?
So we're just estimating job years per our methodology. We're we're not looking at this from the perspective of here's a new position with X, Y, and Z HVAC installer. This is based off of we've done, I think it's now 4 job studies, partnering with DECD and Guidehouse. So this goes back to 2009, back when they were Navigant. We updated that in 2016, again in 19, and then again last year. So basically the way that this works is this is a kind of a shortcut methodology for looking at impact that we, based off of these studies, they're looking at the number of jobs that get created in terms of direct jobs per $1 million of investment. And that's dependent on the type of investment, be that through the form of a lease or versus debt or versus equity, because you're effectively creating different types of jobs with that, the financing associated. And it's also dependent on the technology through which you're deploying it. So solar, you're going to create fewer jobs than you would, let's say, in hydro. And a lot of that just goes into the work that's needed to actually complete that project. I'll make sure that I get you a copy of the most recent jobs report or job study that we did. And we worked with Nandika over at DCD. And so when we're looking at the indirect and induced, that's really, those multipliers really come from working with her. The direct are what really come from Guidehouse and their study.
Okay, all right, no, thank you. Just
And I
one other
see-
question, we can
Yeah,
continue.
and I see Brian just dropped the docs into the chat, so.
Yeah, oh, I see a second one. Okay, open up the first link. Perfect. Okay, good. Yeah, I think this probably answered my questions. Okay, I'll read these offline, and if I have any follow-ups, I can always follow up offline, right, on the job.
Awesome. I'm
right, thank
happy
you.
to talk through it at length. All right. So kind of recapping on revenue. So we walked through this last time. We were forecasting revenues of $54 million for the year. This is against about 54 million where we are this year. The big difference that I want to highlight here is our earned revenues as a portion of revenues is up significantly. So those are revenues that are coming from our own investing activities, as opposed to revenues that are coming from the system benefit charge or from Regi auction proceeds. The big difference we've had year on year is the Regi cap went into place. And so now the anything that's over $5.2 million from a regional greenhouse gas initiative proceeds perspective is flowing to DEEP for the funding of the cheaper EV rebates. Hi, Adrian. How are you? Oops. I think you're on mute, but oops.
My deepest apology, well, whatever they are. I'm sorry.
Oh, no worries, no worries. Happy to have you.
Yeah, no, we're thrilled that you're here, Adrian.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
thank you. Go ahead. I was looking at the slides, by the way, so I just lost track of time.
So I was just recapping on revenues and just highlighting the fact that our earned income is grown as a proportion of our income, which is a good thing, highlighting our sustainability. So that brings us to expenses. And there are a couple different ways that we could walk through this. I think from my perspective, the way I'd like to go about this is just highlight a couple of things in here for you that really tell the story of how we're planning to achieve what we're aiming to achieve next year and kind of differences year on year. Overall, looking at this, like if you look at the bottom line numbers, OPEX is up 10% year on year, which absent knowing anything of what goes into this, you could say, hey, that's all due to inflation. It's not all due to inflation, but let me let me walk through this and highlight what are the drivers that are changing year on year. So I'll start programmatically. Incentive programs from an energy storage solutions, RSIP, our residential solar incentive program, and Smart E. We have a year-on-year decrease in expenses, and that's primarily due to the revenue grade meter replacement project. We've made a lot more progress in that. There's a handful of meters that are still out there that we need to tackle, but that's the big driver in the decrease there. Our RSIP program, as you're aware, the sign has been taken down. We're not taking new applications. We're in full asset management mode. We're currently closing down PowerClerk, which is a major cost center. PowerClerk is the application portal that really ran the program. We're in the process of closing that out, so we need to get a bunch of the data right there and then move off of it. We have a plan for extracting the data. It's just getting everything in the way that we want it to be before we extract it. So we're basically, that's a long-winded way of me saying we need the platform for another 6 months to a year, and then we won't have that expense anymore. So it's there now for the full year. We hope to not have to use it, but we certainly won't use it after this year. Similarly,
Eric,
yes.
sorry, quick question just on that power, and I'm new to this PowerClerk, but on your operating expenses, I'm thinking it's under line item program development administration. Is that the PowerClerk? Okay, just want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. Okay, perfect.
It goes into program admin.
Okay, thank you.
Along those lines related to it, it really hits the incentive programs, but it hits elsewhere in our budget in terms of our lease funds. We're looking at the way that we ingest our solar production data. Right now, we leverage a platform from Also Energy that we basically pay them to aggregate meter data from all the various meter companies and third-party owners that we work with so that we can have it in a consolidated online platform. What we've learned over the years is even though they're aggregating, they may not be aggregating it the way that we want to see it in a way that is most beneficial to us, and it's really costing us a lot of money. So we're working to tap into a lot of existing technology that's out there. So each of the meter manufacturers have their own API or a way to access their data. So we're working on how do we tap into that rather than go via Locus and basically act as our own aggregator. There's a lot of potential savings here, but we budgeted for Locus for the full year, but we're hoping to make this change this year and produce some extra savings. And from a data perspective, this should create some additional efficiencies just by allowing us to get stuff ideally cleaner, or at least more, how do I put this? Our hands will be dirtier in cleaning that data, but we'll be more familiar with it. So it'll make everything that we do with it down the road a lot easier. The other item from a programmatic perspective on the incentive programs I want to highlight is on Smart E. We've budgeted some money here for expansion into water measures and for the new homeowner outreach position. That the homeowner outreach position is really the big year-on-year change. This was part of the Dream Big budget that was approved mid-year. We have Bill Colonis, who's been transitioning into that role, I think is really going to help us reach homeowners in a new way. We also have some marketing money I'll talk about in the marketing budget of how do we get to those homeowners. On the financing program side, we have a year-on-year increase primarily driven by new staff focused on project acquisition. So when we approved the or when the committee and the board approved the mid-year adjustment with the dream bigger scenario, we added 5 new positions that were focused on financing programs and project acquisition. Those were all slated for Q4 of this past fiscal year hiring. We're at various stages of that hiring, but those salaries are now in the budget for a full year. We also have some other additional positions that we're adding. So you have greater expenses due to staff, and that's the primary driver there. The other big driver here is on the EV carbon credits consultant. We recently recently received our credits and monetized them from our carbon credits pilot. We've brought on a consultant, or we've been working with a consultant for several years. That's now included in this budget. This is when we monetize the next round of credits, which should be this time next year, or ideally before, we will be able to fully cover the cost of the consultant, which was a key decision-making factor of whether or not we continued this program. Brian, I see you had a question.
Yeah, just a clarifying point for the commissioner, because we're using certain terms. The Dream Bigger Strategy Commissioner was a mid-year recommendation in January to the board based on the August signing by the president of the Inflation Reduction Act. So when we initially do our budget in this time period, June, July of last year, all of the budget and planning had been approved prior to IRA. Once IRA got passed, our team was really, really excited by what was in there. And they spent the period of time from August through December further refining an alternative scenario to the budget, which was a Dream Bigger scenario, which was if we can hire more people, then we can dig deeper into those tax credits and try to access more resources for Connecticut. So that's what Eric is speaking to now. We're just beginning to kind of roll in those positions. So that's how he's using the term.
There are 2 other expenses. One is in the budget and one needs to be added to the budget. It's an omission that didn't make the mailing, but I'll bring it up here, hopeful for your support. On the financing programs, so we have in here SL2 and SL3 expenses that we have had previously. We just haven't had to include them in our budget, and I think we're having better discipline in terms of actually budgeting and keeping track at the subsidiary level for Solar Lease 2 and Solar Lease 3. But these are operations and maintenance expenses that are going here. The omission to the budget was we have been developing a project with the Department of Corrections, which involves a fuel cell. And we failed to budget and are asking the committee to add it right now to budget for an additional $150,000 for us to bring on an owner's representative, which is standard practice that we've done on the solar side, to work with the Department of Corrections in this development. That order of magnitude fits well and kind of is in line with what we've seen as we've been developing the state solar projects and the municipal assistance program or marketplace assistance program that's been working with the munis and the assistance that we provide there. That's a parallel. So moving on from the programmatically focused, I'll kind of zoom out a little bit and just talk about some other things from an expense perspective in the budget. So compensation and benefits, we walked through our staffing plan in general last time, but I'll just highlight the point that I made a second ago about the 5 new positions that were added as part of the Dream Bigger scenario. That were only there for a fraction of the year, and then the additional 5 positions that we're looking to bring on this year, they're all focused on project acquisition. So this should be helping get money out the door, helping get projects, helping build balance sheet for the organization. This also includes our merit and COLA pools that we previously discussed. Sorry. So marketing.
Eric, sorry,
Yes.
quick question. Sorry, on the 5 new positions, just curious. Is there an expected, I'm assuming here, there's an average influx on the, it's really sales, right? So you have 5 new resources. They're going to go out, they're going to bring money out the door, finance it, bring money in. That makes sense. What's the expectation of the projection? Do we have that somewhere of these 5 new hires equate to this projection and new revenue?
We don't have that. So some of them are, yeah, I mean, we've never really done that type of calculation in the past. Not that we shouldn't, but it just isn't something that we've done. I think we could do a better job, I think, in terms of attribution of who's bringing in what. But I mean, we've typically have had much more of a team focus, so we haven't paid as much attention on that. I mean, we don't typically have a sales staff per se. So I mean,
I understand.
I understand where you're coming from and from previous lives of mine. That I get
CRM,
that.
sales, revenue,
So,
loans. Apologies, I come from the banking world, so I'm just
Yeah.
thinking in that sense. Yeah.
I get it. We've deployed a lot of resources into our CRM as of late, and that's actually one of the big drivers in this year's budget is another big push to get a handful of big CRM projects over the across the finish line that I think will really push the organization to be more focused on project origination. It's been a big, I keep saying it every chance that I get, that if it's not in Salesforce, it didn't happen. And now I need to make sure that we have the tech to make sure that we can get everything in Salesforce. So,
Okay.
but
All right. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt. Okay, so maybe an evolution in the future, we can get refinement of per hire in this role, this
These are-
projection. Or, yeah.
These
Okay,
are what
cool.
our
Thank you.
expectations would be. I think a lot of it, yeah, I think a lot of it will depend on market forces at the time. I mean, I think right now, just part of the discussion last time was what should our expectations of the financing programs be for this upcoming year? I mean, I think there's some general sentiment that there's a potential recession brewing. We would expect to see that a bit of a market pullback on the financing side if that were the case. That said, we also expect to see lots of incentives coming down through the money that's in the IRA. So it's, where do those net out? Our targets are kind of flat, but we expect there to be growth that's a year, 18 months out. And if you look at the lead time on financing program side, I mean, CPACE is not like a quick turnaround sell. That oftentimes the start to close are going to drag well over a fiscal year. So,
Brian, did you have a question?
Yeah, just another clarifying point. One observation, broad observation from this year's budget is that our earned revenues are increasing and covering our operating expenses, which is rare for government, right, commissioners? So like we went at a discipline starting in FY 2018 to begin to I don't want, rely less and less on public revenues and focus more and more on organizational sustainability. So you'll actually see our earned revenues covering our personnel related OPEX, and we're really close, if not above total operating expense. So that's kind of the macroeconomic view. But what we try to look at on a yearly basis is the present value of interest income from the loans that are originated in that year by the financing team. So that's as close as we get, but we get your point, Eric. We should just kind of like note that broadly.
Yeah.
in terms of the discipline.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
So looking at marketing, we have an overall decrease in our marketing spend year on year. Some of this is due to accounting and where we're accounting for our owner's rep development consultant on the solar side for our MAP program. But a lot of this has to do with the fact that we've tackled some big projects this year. We have a new website that's up and running. We've done a fair amount of integration. We've launched our new third-party branding platform. So we're dialing back some of those expenses. There's some new things that are in here. So I mentioned before some of the direct outreach to homeowners. I think John, Adrian, you might have seen this presentation last year. We got given grand list data for much of the state. We had a Climate Corps fellow who came in and did the rough job of normalizing the data, building a database out of it, and helping us kind of test target homeowners out of it.
Right.
Caleb, who is our Climate Corps fellow, will be joining us full time to help us put this in practice. So how do we get, like, what are the predictive analytics behind figuring out whether or not a homeowner is somebody who's apt for taking on energy efficiency measures. And then we have some marketing dollars to actually go out and reach them through direct mail or other types of campaigns. And we have our homeowner outreach person, Bill, who's there to kind of help guide that process and help drive it as well. So those are the really big changes in marketing. I mean, our other focus is just kind of refining and smoothing some of the changes that we've made in previous years, making sure that everything that we set out to do from a web presence and a social media presence is as smooth as what we'd intended. I think at this point it's not as smooth as where we want it to be, but I think that it's not that far off. There's just a little bit of tweaking that'll carry over into next year. So research and development, we have a year-on-year decrease of about $362,000. The big driver behind this is the fact that the hydrogen study was completed. That was the big lion's share of expenses last year. Most everything that's in the research and development budget is related to our environmental infrastructure expansion. Consulting and professional fees. This is the biggest increase year on year, the $550,000. This is primarily due to the reallocation of the expense that we previously had out of marketing and into this bucket for our owner's rep, as I mentioned, for the MAP program and our carbon markets consultant. So both of those expenses get made up back by the revenue that are earned from the projects that they're supporting. So our owner's rep, that gets covered by the or recovered by the payments that we earn through the PPAs that we're developing, or if we sell up those PPAs to a third party owner through that development fee. And then our carbon markets consultant, as I previously mentioned, will recover that cost when we monetize the carbon credits this time next year.
Now, Eric, I had a question back with research and development. And I raised it at a previous board meeting. And I think, Brian, you had said it's like not the type of thing that we normally do with the Green Bank. But I think that, ground heat pumps are like insanely overpriced. And I wish that there was somebody, if not somebody, maybe CI, that could spend some money and take apart the cost of a ground heat pump and installation and equipment and figure out how to get some of that cost out of there, because they're just like such a great solution in terms of home heating oil. But at $25,000 a pop or whatever it is, they're beyond the reach of most people. So is there some way that we could creatively do such a project under research and development?
Yeah, I think we could. So I'm putting on, I was thinking out loud here, putting on my joint committee kind of hat, the Conservation and Load Management, EDC, Energy Efficiency Board, and Green Bank Board cap. I think, John, like we would probably want to raise it there. We've got a meeting coming up there about that, so we can see what the CLNM and EEB are doing when it comes to heat pumps. I know it's a priority for them, but I think the question you're raising is, boy, it feels like these things are more expensive than they need to be. That may be the case, which would then speak to, how do we compare ourselves to other states in the Northeast region, to get to the bottom of it, sort of a
Right.
thing. That would be my suggestion. And then the R&D resources would be there to support such a study. And, I think we would encourage our partners underneath the joint committee, the EDCs, to jointly contribute to that as well, if that committee, decided to move in that direction. So yeah, the R&D is kind of open for those types of questions.
So how does one get that on the agenda then?
I'll put it on while we're talking.
Okay. Adrian?
Well, in the heat pump area, we're doing all sorts of seminars here in Bridgeport at the behest of Operation Fuel and the Energy Task Force Fund to get people interested in heat pumps. And I must admit, while we tell them about the ground heat pumps, we really are pushing the air heat pumps because of the differential in cost. And
Right.
I think it'd be interesting to, as John points out, to spend some time looking at the differential, and not only in terms of price, what can be done about the ground heat pumps, because I think the biggest part of that expenditure is the drilling. And those of us who live in Bridgeport are drilling into either water if you live in the south end, or ledge if you live in the north end. And I'm pretty sure that the same issues are true across Connecticut. There are a lot of barriers to getting to do the ground heat pumps. So it might be worthwhile knowing which kind that we're going to promote and support, and what kind of subsidies we could support it with.
I'd add to those costs the cost of ductwork, or potential cost of ductwork.
Yeah. Well, I can tell you that can be resolved by placing the exchangers, near the house, just on the outside, and that's what we did in our house. And just you shorten it up with that. So there are lots of different, I guess, technical ways of approaching this, and you might spend some time looking at what the comparative solutions yield, or what kind of drawbacks they have.
Yeah, I think that's great information, and it gets to what I'm talking about. Is just like, let's just challenge some stuff on this, because it's crazy that the costs are crazy. Maybe they're unavoidable, but anyways, thank you, Eric.
Yeah, thank you, John. Other points I just want to highlight really quickly, expense wise, bond issuance costs, we have not budgeted in here to issue a bond. I think when we started the budget cycle, that was definitely our view. We're now of the view of, well, you know what, we might do our final Shrek issuance during next fiscal year. If we do decide to proceed that route, we will include any bond issuance costs as part of the mid-year recast. So then from a grants perspective, we're projecting about 9.5 million for our existing programs. That's down about 41% year on year. Budget on budget, we had forecast for some money for a $5 million matching grant to attract some federal funds. We're not expecting to need that. We've started to see the form that the money in the greenhouse gas reduction fund is going to take, and the expected ways that we can see that flowing to us. So we have not included that in here. I'll also highlight we have not included any of the money that's potentially coming from the greenhouse gas reduction fund directly or indirectly to us, basically because none of that's a done deal yet, as those NOFOs have not been issued. We don't want to count our chickens before they hatch. Commissioner?
Yeah, just Eric, are you talking about first line in slide 13? I just want, because I still see slide 12.
Oh,
But I think what you're referring to is
I am starting. Thank you for catching that. Yes.
Yeah.
first line of this slide. Is that
So
the 91% reduction is what you're referring to?
I'm talking about the 41% reduction. So about 4 lines down from there, but effectively the $5 million reduction is in that first line, that 91%.
Right. Okay. All right. Thank you. Just want to make sure I'm looking at the right thing. Thanks.
So overall, from a budget perspective, we are looking at net revenues over expenses being at basically 11 million over versus 6.9 million last year on budget, or year to date about 15 million. So budget on budget, we are doing better. Budget versus actual, I mean, we'll see where we end up this year, but we're coming in similar orders of magnitude. So any questions on the expenses as I've gone through them so far?
Can you just, sorry, Eric, just rewind on the federal, because you mentioned match. So in the past, IRA was big. There's a lot for me personally at DCD, I'm leading federal funds, and IRA is a big old deal. So there's this large reduction. I mean, it's 91% is sizable, but 41% overall for the programs. A lot of it's federal. Can you just restate it one more time? It's not impactful. Sorry, just say it one more time.
Yeah.
Just want to make sure I understand.
So this was effectively a bogey that we budgeted for last year in case we needed it. That often we didn't know what we budgeted this well before the IRA passed last year, and we knew that there was a potential for federal funds, specifically the bipartisan infrastructure legislation. I think there were some other things that were kind of on our radar at the time. And we said, you know what, let's budget $5 million that we could use as like a matching grant to attract other federal funds.
Right.
So we ended up not using it. So it was there in case we needed it. The opportunity didn't present itself. And so that's the big difference, budget on budget here.
Got it. Okay, so it was a one-time match that was held in order to pursue the opportunity. You didn't need it. Those funds go back. They're reallocated into the pool. And then, but this doesn't mean you won't, the Green Bank won't receive additional federal funds as they come up in the future, right?
The big pot of money that we're interested in from an Inflation Reduction Act perspective is the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the 20.7 billion pot of money, or 27 billion pot of money. That's made up of 3 pools. There's the $7 billion, the Bernie 7 Solar for All, which is competitive grants to states. We're working with Deep and the Department of Banking and others in pursuit of Connecticut's unfair share, as Brian likes to say.
I'm very sure.
We are working, there's the NCIF, the National Climate Investment Fund, which will be awarded to 2 to 3 national recipients who will then partner with local and regional institutions and do some direct and indirect investing. We're working with the Coalition for Green Capital, among others, on their application into that. And then finally, there's the CCIA, the community. I'm going to blank on exactly what the acronym is for, but that's really focused on developing community institutions to distribute this capital.
Okay.
So we're working again on Connecticut's unfair share there. So we're figuring out exactly how we're going to go into that, but we're looking to bring along with us as many in Connecticut as we possibly can in terms of other mission aligned and mission adjacent organizations.
Okay,
So,
perfect.
Brian,
Thank
you want to chime in?
Yeah. Just in addition to the IRA with the tax credits and the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund, the IIJA, or the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, Commissioner, as you know, like has a ton of stuff in there. It's really difficult to track when all the various agencies are releasing RFPs. We're pretty good at capturing requests for information and public comment, but not so good at capturing when the opportunities come and when you have to put pencil to paper to start writing those applications. So I just chatted through a climate program portal that we use that's freely available, that allows the user to go into a dashboard and see all the available by all the federal agency programs that are, current or past or in the future. And what we try to do is we meet bi-weekly with Deep and Pura to review these things and see what the agencies are doing on, the formula allocated programs, but more importantly, how to compete and win more resources for Connecticut. And, the $5 million pool, when we looked back at this year, Sarah Harari and myself, based on what we missed, we didn't miss much in terms of what we could have gone after, but that pool of resources could help us compete in the future. Specifically if we partner with communities, who are pursuing them. I mean, I'd love to sit down with you to figure out how we could mobilize that to our mutual objectives, to make us more competitive, in any of those future applications. But it's hard to identify them and then go after them. But we haven't missed much.
Okay, that's good to know. Yeah, and Brian, I would love to have a follow-up on it, only because, and we can proceed. I know, just last comment on it. The statewide leadership IAJ worked closely with Paul Lavoie, with Deep on submitting that. So it was 2 million with $600,000 match, things like that. So, but I believe a lot of these do touch the Green Bank and Deep, and I've been in active conversations with Deputy Commissioner Hank Webster. So yeah, offline from this, we'll continue to proceed through this, but yeah, that would be a conversation I'd love to have. Thank you.
So 2 other things I want to highlight on here. The first is on battery storage incentives. We have 1.8 million budgeted for the year. This is based off of our expected rate of, or what our expectations are around when these things are getting approved by the utilities. We have no control of how quickly or how slowly that interconnection process goes, which could significantly speed up the need to pay out incentives especially on the commercial side where they're much higher, if things do accelerate more quickly than expected. If that's the case, we will come back to the committee as part of the mid-year recast to make that adjustment. But this is our best guess based off of what we've been seeing in terms of approvals so far. The other number that I'll highlight on here is the $250,000 that is near the bottom under non-operating expenses related to our last bit of ERA funds, going back to speaking of federal funds that we know. We've been doing our best to get this out the door. We ran an interest rate buy down this year on Smarty with the intention of getting these out the door. There's some stragglers that I think will carry over into next year that should eat up the rest of these. If not, we'll figure out another way to get them out through a more targeted, smaller, or not more targeted, a more limited interest rate buy down on Smarty or something along those lines. But that would come back to the board for approval on that intent. Other questions or concerns? All right. We'll move on to investments. So I've done a bad job at this in the past. So when I want to make sure that I don't overcloud myself. When we set targets, there are really three numbers that we're worried about. There's our capital deployed, which is kind of how we're growing the green economy in Connecticut. That's the overall size of the projects that we're doing from a dollar perspective. And that was in the first page of target. So that the next number is kind of the Green Bank capital committed. And so that's, hey, we're approving transactions that's going to use X amount of Green Bank capital. And as you guys are aware, we don't want to be using our capital to cover the full cost of any project. That's not with the Green Bank model. We want it to cover the smallest portion of that project that builds our balance sheet and enables it to happen. And so that's really what I'm talking about here, or what I was kind of talking about that at the beginning. So in terms of the approvals as well, so that's that $31 million number. This is how much of that's actually going to go out the door this next year. So that's either approvals and projects that are closing this next fiscal year, so what'll flow out the door, and those that have been closed in prior years. So what you're seeing here is in the top section, we have our portfolio loans. So that's from our various programs that we're expecting to go out the door. So you'll see we're expecting to advance in FY24 1.3 million multifamily. Some of that's going for line draws on our facility with Capital for Change in their continued marketing and development of low energy multifamily energy projects, the line program. We are looking at 3.3 million to be drawn on our facilities with Posigen.
The smoke's really bad.
Okay.
In terms of our CPACE portfolio, we're expecting to lend $7.7 million of our own funds. We're expecting to use 3.2 million of Green Bank funds towards state solar and state renewable energy projects. Some of that should go to the DOC fuel cell project, I believe is in that number. We have 4 million for municipal solar projects. 300,000 for PPA PPA projects that get brought to us. We have $3.2 million in loans to PPA developers for us being subordinated debt in them, and then 2.3 million for our share of our continued operating of the SBA facility that we have with Eversource, or for Eversource that we have with Amalgamated Bank. The final section for program loans that we have up here is $5 million, which is basically to cover what comes in the door into Bert's world. As we've seen this year, there's no shortage of people that are knocking on our door looking for funding, and we found some very interesting and I think, rewarding investment opportunities if you look at things that we did like Butterfly this past year. Any questions on the investments, Commissioner?
Yeah, so just going to the unspecified line, which I think is what you're referring to. So the fuel
Yep.
cell brought in line item, get it, but unspecified, I think that's what you're just talking about. So
Yeah.
Bert has a separate portfolio of investments that he's made.
So we issued, I guess this was 2 or 3 years ago, our capital solutions RFP, which basically says, hey, if you need green bank capital to make a project work and you're not able to access that capital elsewhere, come tell us why you think the market is mispricing debt, or why we should be interested. And so we have this ongoing open RFP, and we've had a variety of things come through that. We have other projects that have bubbled up through municipalities. The Groton project is another example of just kind of a programmatic project finance that has found its way to us.
What is if you don't mind, what is the financial instrument? Is it a debt obligation that you guys are creating or is it equity? I'm just trying to understand what the investment actually is.
It's debt.
It's debt. Okay. It's debt.
9 times out of, not even 9 times out of 10. 999 times out of 1,000, it's going to be debt.
It's going to be debt.
We don't do equity. We did end up with some warrants as part of some of these investments, but.
So 2 additional questions. Then if it's debt, are you senior debt? That's 1. 2, what is the quality of the collateral?
So it's totally going to depend on the project.
It's on the project.
So oftentimes we'll end up as subordinated debt.
Subordinated debt. Okay.
But it's going to totally depend on the deal.
Okay.
Brian?
Yeah, so I wanted to point out 2 things. And Eric, you might have been going here on the 37.4 million, the bottom line.
Mm-hmm.
Is so if we just step back at a macro level, we're putting that amount of investment out that is going to generate principal and interest returns over time. The overall target of the Green Bank broadly from an interest income annual basis is a 4 to 5% return based on a 10-year weighted average maturity. And you can see in the tables that Eric has provided there the interest rates and terms. So when that $37.4 million, if it successfully moves out the door, the interest income next year, the present value of that interest income is going to hopefully cover, I assume it's going to cover the operating expenses of that business unit so that we're operating in a sustainable way. This has become our discipline that we've learned, since FY 2018. So that's just one broad point to bring up there. Secondly, in April of last year, we had at the board meeting the loan program office of the Department of Energy present to the board a new state energy financing institution policy that they have access to now, which is to say that the federal loan program office can, working with state green banks and other energy financing institutions, provide their lower cost capital for commercially available technology. With the IRA, the loan program office received a huge sum of money to enable that to happen. You might recall, Adrian, John, that the presenter said, we have this authority, but we don't have funding. As a result of the IRA, they now have funding. So what we're strategically doing now is working with the loan program office to identify opportunities where we can partner with the LPO commissioner and likely leverage some of our strategic investment on a small level and have the federal resources on a larger level to bring more, national investment in Connecticut. For example, electric school buses, fleets of Uber and Lyft electric vehicles in local car driver portfolios, like interesting things like that we may not have had our finger on the pulse of, but now since there's a national effort from large developers to do it, Connecticut could become a gateway to enabling those large projects to see us and want to work with us to enable their capital to flow. So we're kind of becoming a gateway to the access to those LPO programs, which is great. Our reputation, I think, has earned us that ability. So Bert is our active point, and one of the things you're going to see in our July comprehensive plan is a section on the LPO and CEFI that speaks more to this growing relationship.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, I look forward to the July plan then and sort of digging in. So, okay, thank you.
And to Brian's earlier point, we are forecasting that these loans should be contributing about $10.9 million in interest over their lives to the Green Bank balance or to the Green Bank revenues. And these have a weighted average return of 4.42% and a weighted average life of 8 years. So we're ahead of our target if you're digging into that 8-year weighted average life. So any other questions as I move on to strategic partners?
I just had a comment that I think that the Green Bank's been really skillful in finding kind of the Goldilocks position. We get a lot of there's just like this kind of this chatter about, we don't want to undercut the market, and we don't want to offer things that are too good so that private, people that are involved in the market and this stuff like solar companies and stuff are undercut by the Green Bank. But at the same time, we want to be a force for moving climate change work forward, and the bank has done a great job at like finding that a sweet spot where we can deflect that kind of criticism but still be meaningful. And it's not it doesn't mean that we don't get slammed by some people, but they have less justification for what they're saying.
Yeah, it's a good point, John. Like there's a delicate balance between trying to be very actively involved in helping enable markets to be served while not stepping in front of the private markets. And, our solar municipal assistance program is a good example of that, where, there may be some communities that have been left behind in the policy, the incentive market for zero emission renewable energy credits or the current non-residential renewable energy solutions program. And, they may have been left behind because it was too difficult for developers to work with them because a town may not have a point person, on sustainability or somebody who could think about energy. So, our solar map really is to help them, develop and get to a point to where the town can realize energy savings. So we try to make that competitive and open market as much as we can. But it is a delicate balance when you're operating in a market where the incentives have caps. But we're conscious about it. Our team is managing through it. And I think my team feels that we are opening the pie for more projects to happen that may not have happened otherwise.
Right.
So, it's a delicate balance.
So moving on to strategic partners. Just a reminder for the committee, our strategic partners are vendors where we're looking to have significant spend in a fiscal year, to the point where we, from a governance perspective, would need either the chair or the board to approve of these PSAs. So we're bringing these that we know of to the committee and to the board for their endorsement and blessing that we go ahead and start work on professional services agreements with these organizations. Most of these are our existing partners that we've worked with in the past. So our IT vendor, AdNet Technologies, Clean Power Research, who provides the Power Clerk software I mentioned earlier, Ultradomus, our CPACE servicer, Inclusive Prosperity Capital, our program execution and investment management partner, DNVGL, our CPACE technical administrator and Shrek due diligence provider, Guidehouse, who we work with on technical design, and EM&V. They've already reminded to the board their 3-year PSA for the evaluation, measurement, and verification for the Energy Storage Solutions program has previously been approved and runs through this year. NovaSource, who is we're working with on O&M for our solar lease funds and for meter replacements. Our accountants, PKF O'Connor Davies, CTEC Solar, Go Agency, that shouldn't read formally Stark Rating. Stark Rating was our previous agency. Our new agency is just called Go. And Craftsman Technologies, who's our Salesforce developer, and Strategic Environmental Associates, who is our carbon markets consultant. So from that, I bring to you, if you guys are ready, a resolution for a recommendation to the board.
I had one question before we move the resolution. And I'm just curious. I know that the strategic partners are selected based on that them being superior deliverers of whatever services we need, but are any of them, or are most of them, or what, Connecticut based? Do we know?
So a lot of them are. So AdNet is Connecticut based. I know they recently were purchased by a private equity fund, but the subsidiary AdNet is Connecticut based. Clean Power Research is not. Ultradomus, I believe, has a Connecticut presence. I'm not sure where their base is. Inclusive Prosperity Capital clearly has a significant base in Connecticut. Guidehouse does not. NovaSource, I'm unsure of. PKF O'Connor Davies has a significant presence here, but like most medium to large accounting firms, I mean, I know they're certainly regional and dispersed where their clients are. CTEC Solar is locally based. Go is locally based. Craftsman is, they have an entirely virtual workforce with some based in Connecticut, but from a domicile perspective, they are based in Massachusetts, and Strategic Environmental Associates are based in Portland.
Oh, thank you. I think it's good that we have at least some Connecticut companies involved there, because that's another angle of attack, number one, and number two, we want to promote Connecticut companies where we can, for sure. So with that, let's go to the resolution. So do you need to read it? Are you going to read it over, or what do you want to do?
If you'd like me to read it, but
or people can just read it on their screens. So we have a recommendation to enter into new or existing professional service agreements with the listed providers. And the resolution would be for us to recommend approval to the board. Is there a motion to approve?
And one thing I will say is when this does get presented to the board, I would like, with your approval, to add to it the $150,000 that we omitted and caught yesterday for the fuel cell rep. Cool.
All right, with that understanding, is there a motion to approve?
I motion to approve.
And a second? Adrian, are you seconding it?
Yes.
Okay, under discussion, hearing any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of approving the resolution signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, the ayes have it.
Cool. All right.
We never approved the minutes because
Oh,
Adrian
you're
wasn't
right.
here
Why
yet.
don't you approve the minutes? I need to prep something, so I'll let you guys do that momentarily.
Sure. Okay, so it was resolution number 1 to approve the minutes for the May meeting of the Budget Operations and Compensation Committee. Do I hear a motion?
I have a motion.
Okay, motion made and seconded. Under discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor of approving signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So now we're going to do executive session, and do we need to do anything, Eric?
I think we need a motion to go into executive session, and I need Joe B to catch me when I ultimately fall on the technology of pushing people to rooms. But if there's a motion,
Okay.
if somebody would like to make a motion, that would be great.
I'll make the motion.
Do we have a second?
I second.
Okay, we have a motion made and seconded to go into executive session. Any discussion?
Brian, do we have to make that motion based on personnel related mattars, like be clearer?
Yeah, I think we do need to mention that it is
Okay,
for
so with
personnel.
that understanding, I apologize, that wasn't part of the, but as part of the motion, all those in favor?
To include the motion.
Okay,
Aye.
so
Yes. Second.
all those in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay. So now we lower the cone of silence, Eric.
Okay, Joe.
Yes.
So which button am I pressing?
Okay, so I can open the room. So all of the committee members, as well as Brian Farnan, will automatically be moved into that room. So you don't have to touch anything. Eric and Brian Garcia will have to join the room once it's been opened. So there's a,
Okay.
All right.
and the rest of the attendees of this meeting will be kept in this this space of the main meeting. Eric, it says you're managing the room. So if you click on the rooms button at the very top in the taskbar,
Yep. And
then
hit
executive
open.
session, yep, hit open, and then the 3 dots next to it for you and Brian to join.
Okay, I will do that.
Okay. Are we good? There's Eric.
Give it a sec, John. It looks like he moved the wrong people out.
Oh, well.
I don't think me and Ariel's supposed to be in here.
Oh, so you want me to go in there? Does John have to go in there?
John has to go in there, yep. So
What do I do?
Rooms.
Yeah. And then click on that one
Yeah,
and
join.
then click join.
Okay,
John, this is Dan Smith. I'm here in the office. I saw Joe run over to Brian's office, so he's trying to figure this out. Just hang tight.
oh, join room, I see it. So I hit join room?
I believe
Yes.
so.
Joe, can you hear me?
He's just going back to his desk, Cheryl.
Okay, because it looks like me and Ariel is in this room and we're not supposed to be. I can always leave, but
No, we stayed here,
Yeah, Joe said that they put the executive session in
and
a different
everybody
room
else
and they'll
went to
come
a
back
different room.
after.
Yeah.
Sorry
oh,
about that.
is that
Yeah.
why they're showing on hold, Joe? Because
Yeah,
they're in
so everyone else is in executive session. Something, I don't know if John, see how John says John H. guest? I think
Right.
he maybe joined from something
The
different
link.
than what we added him to earlier this week, Cheryl. So that's why
Yeah.
he didn't automatically carry over.
Oh, okay, because I got confused.
Yeah. And then Eric was it said Eric was managing the room, so he whatchamacallit, he had to do the like physical, like the actual manual adding of people, of just
Oh,
John.
okay. All right. So they're good.
They are good. Yep.
All right. Well, I'm going off mute, off mic and back on mute, I should say.
Okay.
All right. If you need me, just holler. I'm sitting here.
Okay. And I actually think they may just adjourn. I don't think there was anything else on the I don't think there was anything else on the agenda, but
Right.
well,
Well, they
we
need
can-
to come back
The-
and formally adjourn so that Ariel
Yeah.
can catch it.
okay.
Yeah, they have to come back from executive session, vote on the resolution publicly, even
Yeah.
if the
Right.
contents aren't
Okay.
discussed, and then vote to
Text
adjourn.
Eric. Okay.
Right. We got this, Ariel. We know what to do.
Looks like they closed executive session, so they should be coming back. Yep. Perfect.
Oops. All right.
Okay,
You
so
ready to
are
go?
we back out of the
Yes.
phantom zone?
Back in the main room.
Okay,
So I think we just needed to.
so we should repeat the,
Yeah,
The motion.
do you want to,
I can read that out.
Yes, that's fine.
Yeah, whereas section 5.2 or 5.3.2 of the bylaws of the Connecticut Green Banks operating procedures charge the Budget Operations and Compensation Committee with oversight of human resources policies and practices. Now therefore be it resolved that the Budget Operations and Compensation Committee of the Green Bank Board hereby recommends approval of the discussed severance agreement.
okay, so now a motion and a second, please.
Okay, so moved.
I second.
Thank you. And I think we've discussed it enough, but is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstaining? Okay, the motion carries. All right. Well, that was painful enough to do once, but 3 times was great.
Well, thank you all for your patience and your time today. I appreciate all your feedback and all your input in both the personnel matter and in the budget. I think that we have a stronger budget for all the input that we've received over the years and from the committee.
Well,
And-
thank you, Eric, and everyone else that's worked on putting the budget together. It's an artful display of economic prowess and a little bit of maybe really sophisticated guesswork.
Well, maybe there's more of one of those that I would like to admit, but I do want to take the opportunity to thank Jane and Dan, who always do a bigger part of this than comes across in these meetings, and that we'd be lost without either of them. So,
Well, yeah,
Thank you.
the committee as a whole seconds that, and as I'm sure the board does.
Okay.
So,
Right,
but in the
thank you.
meantime,
You.
we are we're over our time. So, is there a motion to adjourn
The motion.
and a second? And
Second.
okay, and thank you very much. And we'll see you at the board meeting. Take
Thanks,
care.
everyone.
Excellent.
Bye.
Bye bye.
Bye, all. Sorry about the baseball game.